Katie Tape. I am a junior from Hermantown. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to be presenting with Dean about environmental sustainability.
Hi, I'm Dean McManus. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a junior at Harbor City International School in Duluth. And I'll let Katie go ahead and start us off with some ways that you personally can make your own life more sustainable.
Yeah, so the first really easy way that I have been more sustainable in my life is using the search engine Ecosia as my default browser on my phone and on my computer. It's really it plants trees for every search that you make, and I think Tyler has the link for it, so he'll put that in the chat, and then you guys can download it for your browsers on your computers or your phones. And it's really just an easy way that you can contribute to restoring biodiversity in a bunch of different countries throughout the world and helping mitigate the effects of the climate crisis. And then another way is not using plastic bags. So I know in Duluth there is a bag ordinance, and so a lot of people have not been using plastic bags because of that, but I know in other areas of the region there aren't bag ordinances, and so even though it's not they aren't taxed, you can still bring your own bag and contribute to lessening the plastic pollution problem. And then one thing that's really popular right now are NFTs and crypto, and those are really bad for the environment. So we can't completely avoid them because the world is becoming more and more digital every day. And so there are environmentally sustainable cryptos such as Cardano and Solarcoin and Chia, and they're all way better options than Bitcoin. And so if you have any questions about those, you can send them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them, because crypto is kind of complicated and I don't really think I have enough time to explain it all the way. And then another thing that I'm sure a bunch of us have done or heard of is thrift clothing. It's a really nice way to develop your own sense of style while also not contributing and partaking in the fast fashion industry, which is what the East Kids kind of talked about, and how bad it is for the environment and how bad it is for the workers. But at the same time, it's really important to recognize your privilege and know that in some cases, you might be taking away clothing and items that people who can only afford thrifting and secondhand that they can afford to buy. So just be mindful of that as well, and really only buy what you need, which is something that kind of permeates throughout all of life in ways to be more sustainable. And then the last way is donating used mascara wands. I know it's kind of a niche way to be more sustainable, but there is an organization called Wands for Wildlife, and I will put the link in the chat. And so you can donate your used mascara wands. And I know that they pile up after you use them, and you have to throw them out because you can't really recycle them. And so if you send them into this company, they will use them when they rehabilitate animals, and it really helps for cleaning and grooming smaller animals like turtles and chipmunks and rabbits and stuff like that. So that is all that I have, and I know I went really fast, so if you have any questions, just send them in the chat and I will pass it over to Dean and they can talk.
Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of ways that communities, cities, regions can be sustainable. We all probably know about things like the plastic bag ordinance, which is all of Duluth and other cities all across the country. And we all know about the thrifting clothes and things like that. And it's really important to support not only your community but your city and your region, because okay, it's important to acknowledge your privilege, as Katie said, and there are so many ways that we can help our community and build up a more sustainable community by things like like resource programs and volunteering and things like that. And honestly, research is your best friend. Like, and use things like Ecosia for research. It's amazing. Our community in Duluth, we have places like Chum. We have, like Savers. We have all of our schools do like important volunteer work, and we do things like penny wars, and we do like gaining resources for groups like Chum, which are all very important. So please, like, help with those. Bring those resources in. And it's also important to do things like, let me find it here. It's important to do things like, I'm sorry, I'm out of words. To use your voice, because using your voice is important. We all have a voice, and all of our voices connected are powerful. A lot of people probably know about Line 3, right? We know about things like that. And it's important to use our voice to not only educate others, but to push for change, to push for change. Because as a community, as cities and things like that grow, and like, I'm sorry, I'm out of words. But it's important to work together to create a more sustainable place in everything we do. We can do things like community gardens. We can do things like smart street poles, which are kind of really cool. They're LED based, like, updates. The community can connect light poles to form like information sensors and gather air quality data, and monitoring traffic and things like that. Like, anything like that is important and like really cool, because we have the time and we have the resources to do things like that. And honestly, communicating with your community to push for things like that is awesome. And we can create change, and we can create a more sustainable world, like anything down from the basic acknowledging that there's a climate crisis to creating those community gardens, to getting that data on like air quality and things like that, so that we can look for not only small changes in our community, but putting out that information into the world, and helping like scientists, and helping like our government and things like that to create change. Yeah, that stuff is like really important and really cool too. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. I really liked how you talked about the importance of community involvement. I think that's really important and really impactful, especially since we live in an interconnected world and all of us are eventually going to be affected by the climate crisis. I also did see that someone asked in the chat why crypto, or what ways crypto is impacting the environment. So when you mine for crypto, you have to use a lot of electricity and a lot of energy. And so one stat that I found when I was doing research is that mining one single Bitcoin uses about 2,300 hours of kilowatt electricity, which is enough to power a US home for over 78 days, which is really, like an astronomical waste of energy and electricity, and it's really bad for the planet. And so using cryptos that ask for proof of stake rather than proof of work upon purchase just helps you alleviate all of the energy usage in crypto. And so if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Tyler.
All right, great. Yeah, you can always add questions in the chat as well throughout this last presentation about anything that we've talked about today. But I will start sharing my screen, and I let Keegan, is there anything you want me to you want to say before I share your video?
Sorry, I was on mute. I don't really think there's anything else. Like, I kind of introduced myself in the at the beginning of the video too, but there's nothing I can really think of right now. So I think I'll just let Tyler play the video. I would share my screen, but my computer tends to have technical difficulties, and that's why he has the video. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Keegan McCullough, and I'm a member of the Youth in Action Leadership Council. One of my passions is cooking, so I wanted to create a presentation that combines cooking with another one of our topics for the conference tonight, sustainability. Kitchen sustainability is really important to me, so I try to practice all sorts of things that help lessen waste in the kitchen, since food waste and also like plastic and stuff is a big issue when cooking. Today I'm going to make a dish with quinoa and sauteed kale and a fried egg. It can be a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. It's really versatile and really simple, and I'm going to show you how to make it. I'm going to start by cooking the quinoa, since that takes about 15 minutes to cook, give or take a few minutes. And here I've got quinoa, which I like to buy in bulk. It's a way to save on plastic packaging and stuff. I live in Duluth, so we have the Whole Foods Co-op, which is a great option for bulk. I bring mason jars and other reusable packaging, and you can just go to the bulk section, and they've got grains and flours and all sorts of things you can get. So here's our quinoa, and then I've got a measuring cup and our pan. And for quinoa, you want to cook it with a 2-to-1 water to quinoa ratio. And you always wash the quinoa too. So let's start out by washing the quinoa. Let's do 3/4 of a cup of quinoa. And then we'll do 1.5 cups water. And I'm going to put this over on the stove, and once it's boiling, then I turn it down to low and set a timer for, I usually like to do 12 minutes, but sometimes it takes a little longer. You just want to look for when the little grains have opened up and all the water has absorbed. And I'll show you what that looks like once it's done.
Next, I'm going to take these raw pumpkin seeds, which I also bought in the bulk section at the co-op, and I'm going to dry toast them in a skillet. Toasting them gives them a nice golden color and a yummy, toasty, deep flavor. And they get crunchier. So here's our skillet. I'm going to put it on medium, and we're going to put these in the pan. They're going to need probably 5-10 minutes-ish, depending on how hot your skillet gets and how quickly. We just want a nice even layer like that.
Next, I'm going to wash and chop the kale. You don't need to use kale for this recipe. Any hardy green that can stand up to heat would be great. Honestly, in the summer, what I like to use is beet greens, because we grow beets in the garden, and that's another way to minimize waste. People often, when they use beets, just think of like the red beet part of it that grows underground. But the greens are totally edible too, and they're actually great for sauteing like kale. You can make pesto with them. They're super versatile. So since it's winter and we don't have access to good beet greens right now, I bought this kale at the grocery store. And as you can see, it's in a mesh bag rather than the little single-use plastic baggies that they have in the produce section. My family bought these online, and they're super helpful just for any produce, honestly, and another way to minimize waste in the kitchen. So here's our kale. Make sure you always wash kale, because it can have dirt and bugs and stuff like that, especially if it's organic kale.
When you start to hear a popping noise coming from the pumpkin seeds, that means they're starting to toast. So make sure you give them a few stirs so they don't burn on one side and are raw on the other. So our pumpkin seeds are nicely toasted. They can quickly go from toasted to burnt, so we're going to put them in this little bowl on the side here.
Kale has these really thick and fibrous stems. For this recipe, we don't want them. They are edible, so you can either use them in another recipe, or you can compost them. If that's not an option, I totally understand. You can throw them in the trash and they'll break down. But if you have a compost, that's another great option for minimizing food waste. And the city of Duluth has a composting program where there's various drop sites all around town, and you can collect your compost in just any kitchen container, and there's these compostable bags you can buy, and you can just put any of that compost into your bags, and then you can bring the bag to the drop site and the city will compost it for you, which is really cool. We want to chop our kale pretty fine for this recipe. We don't want like big stringy chunks of kale. So we're going to ball it up into this big kind of blob. And then I've got this big knife. A bigger knife works better for chopping kale too, because you can kind of get more leverage and keep your fingers out of the way, obviously. And just kind of start with an initial chop. And then keep blobbing it up like this and chopping again until it's kind of the size you want it to be. Next, we're going to mince a clove of garlic. Garlic has like this flaky, peely skin on it that you want to get off before you chop it. Again, the skin, you can put it in the compost, put it in the trash. It's just that part's not edible. So to get the skin off, I'm going to take my palm and my knife, and I'm going to kind of aggressively squish the garlic. And then it peels off fairly easily. So to mince garlic, I'm going to put the garlic down, curl my fingers, and just start chopping it into kind of little strips. Once I've chopped it one way, I'm going to rotate the clove and chop it again the other way. Mince means to cut it really tiny. So right now we still have kind of a bigger, too big of pieces for it to be considered minced. So then what we're going to do, we're just going to keep brushing it off the knife like that, condensing it, and put your palm on top of the knife and just bring it over the garlic like this. Just back and forth. A lot of it will get stuck to the knife. Take it off with your finger carefully. Condense it again, and just chop until it's in lots of little tiny bits. The last thing we need to chop is our sun-dried tomatoes. We've got some dry tomatoes. You can also get them packed in oil in a can. Those are totally fine too. They can work the same way in this recipe. You'll saute them just the same like you do with these. We're just going to take a handful of them here. And these ones are already julienne cut, which means they're in these thin little strips. But we just want them a little bit smaller for our recipe. So I'm just going to take the knife and same technique as the garlic, bring it over the tomatoes like this until they're a little bit smaller. Not nearly as small as the garlic though. That looks about good.
So let's give it a stir. It's a little bit watery still, which means we might want to give it maybe 3 more minutes. We want that water to go away, but the grains are opening up how they're supposed to. If you look closely here, there's little like tails, people call them, on what were just kind of the tight little quinoa ballies. So now we're just going to put the lid back on, set the timer for 3 more minutes, and then it should be kind of light and fluffy, and the water is gone when it's done.
We're going to top the dish with some lemon too. So I'm going to wash the lemon. We get this fruit and veggie wash at the grocery store. You just spray it on whatever produce you're washing, and it can remove some of the pesticides that oftentimes are used to treat various produce items in like commercial settings. So we're just going to wash our lemon with that. going to cut our lemon into quarters. And for now, set it aside.
Checking on the quinoa again, we can see that it's done. There's no water left, and it's all fluffy. So we're just going to take it off the heat and set it to the side, with the cover just kind of loosely on. And we've got our pan over here. The oil was shimmering and steaming, so I briefly took it off the heat so it didn't get too hot. Now we're going to put it back on and crack our egg in. See if I can do this one-handed. Oops, almost. And we're going to season that with some salt and some pepper, and then some everything but the bagel seasoning. That I bought this locally. It's Lithbridge Bagels. It's a local Duluth maker, but you can also find it at Trader Joe's. It's just a mixture of like onion powder, garlic powder, a bunch of different seeds, poppy seeds, sesame seeds, and I think it's really tasty. I want my egg to have a runny yolk, so I think it's ready to flip right now. As you can see, most of the white has cooked. There's just a little bit in the middle that hasn't yet, so I'm going to flip it. And it's nicely golden on the other side. A little bit of it fell off here. And then we're just going to let that cook for a little longer. You can kind of test how squishy the yolk is by lightly tapping this. Not too hard because you don't want to break the yolk, but you can test it like that. And this is almost ready. We're going to call that good. I'm going to take it off the heat and put it on our plate over here. And that's ready for other things once they're ready. Now, in the same pan, I'm going to put a little more oil in. And maybe a little bit of butter as well. And then I'm going to add our sun-dried tomatoes right away. Just kind of saute them briefly on their own. And the pan's still on medium heat, by the way. And then all at once, we're going to add all of our kale. And our garlic. Kale cooks really quickly, so we want to add, and minced garlic does too. So that's why we want to add it at the same time, so that the kale doesn't overcook and the garlic doesn't burn if we added one before the other. We're also going to add some of the same seasonings that I mentioned before. With this cool little lemon squeezing apparatus, I'm going to add some fresh lemon juice. It's going to sizzle a lot. And we're just going to stir that all in as well. And now we can plate this too. We can add our quinoa finally. And we're going to have lots of leftover quinoa, which you can use in various breakfast bowls, lunch bowls. It can be sweet or savory, so it's really versatile. You just put however much quinoa you want with your egg and your kale.
Lastly, we're just going to top it off with some Parmesan cheese. I have a grater and some fresh parm here. You can totally use the pre-shredded parm too. I just prefer fresh if you have access to it. It melts a little bit better and can taste a little better too, since it isn't coated with like the powder that the pre-shredded stuff is to keep it from sticking and clumping. So lots of cheese on top. This is optional, by the way. Here I've got some pickled beets. This is one of my favorite things to buy from the Whole Foods Co-op. It's a relatively local company. I think it's in Wisconsin. Yeah. It's from Cornucopia, Wisconsin. And they make pickled beets just with beets and salt and water, which lots of commercially produced pickled beets have sugar and lots of added preservatives as well. But these are really, really simple, and I use them all the time. So I'm just going to grab a few from the jar. These are also optional if you don't like beets. My brother hates them, so you can totally leave them out. We're just going to chop them up. And place them on top of our dish. I'm also going to top it with a little bit of hot sauce. This is completely optional as well. If you don't like spice, you can leave it off. But I love hot sauce, so I'm going to use this one. It's one that I bought at an art market this summer, an art and food market at Bayfront Park in Duluth. And I think the flavors of it will go really well with our dish.
Lastly, we're just going to add a little bit more lemon juice. And then we have our pumpkin seeds from earlier. You can sprinkle on as many as you want, and leftovers can be used on top of all sorts of things. And then we're going to cut into the yolk. And there's our nice runny yolk. And that's about it.
All right, perfect. So I'm Paris Gricula. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Lauren. I'm a junior at Hermantown.
And we are going to be talking about sustainable mental health. So before I get started, I kind of just want to mention that obviously mental health is such a huge, broad topic. So we encourage you to go and do your own research. We'll only be talking about a couple things tonight just because there's so much. So after this, go and do your own research, find resources that work for you. And yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. So a couple of things. It's okay not to be okay. I know people say that all the time when they're talking about mental health, but it really is. The whole part of your journey is ups and downs. I mean, not every day is going to be good. Not every day is even going to be okay. But that's all part of growth, and that's part of experience. So the first thing is like, you don't have to pretend to be okay. Like, I know when someone says, oh, how's your day going? And you just say, okay, if you're not okay, that's okay to say. You can say, I'm not having a good day. And that's perfectly acceptable. Just being yourself and being who you are, even with all the ups and downs, that's good enough. So we have a quote by Rick Warren. Your illness, even if it's just a bad day, it's not a mental illness, is not your identity. Your chemistry is not your character. You can be whoever you choose to be. Another important thing to remember is that you're not alone. There are more than 50% of people who are diagnosed with a mental disorder, whether this be anxiety or bipolar disorder or depression. And there's so many, and there's so you're never alone, even if it feels like you're alone. There are so many people who not everybody struggles the same, but there are so many people who can relate to what you're feeling. And that's also important to remember. And then also another fact from the CDC is that 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in a given year. And that doesn't mean that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. That might mean that they go through a brief depression because of something that happened, like if they lost a job or they lost a family member. Or that might mean that they're diagnosed with a long-term illness or disorder. So it's very, very common. And the last thing that I just want to remind everybody is that there's nothing wrong with you. Having a mental illness or a disorder does not mean that you are a terrible person. It doesn't mean that it's your fault. And you're strong, like, for having that and being able to survive through that. Because it's a part of who you are, and that's totally okay. So one thing that I encourage everybody to do is to reach out. There's always somebody that you can talk to, whether it be friends, family members, counselors at school, teachers, or trusted adults. There's people out there who can help. You can also text or call a mental health hotline. On the bottom there, we have 2. So this is the Minnesota Crisis Text Line. This is a 24-hour hotline. for anybody who's struggling or who needs help. And then there's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So what I have encouraged people to do in the past is to add these phone numbers to your contacts, because sometimes even just having them there as a resource is a huge help. If you have a friend who's struggling or if you're struggling, they're always there. Another thing that you can do is support people and let them know that you're there. Sometimes just giving them the option of someone to talk to can mean a lot. Not pressuring them to talk, but just being like, hey, I'm here if you ever need anything. And then the last thing that you can do is educate yourself and others about mental health. I know there's a lot on social media now, a lot of influencers and people who are posting about their stories and their journeys, and also posting about different things that help them, or just education about mental health and all of the importance of that. So that's kind of the first thing that we had. And then in the comments, we were hoping that everybody could put somebody that they would feel comfortable reaching out to, just to give everybody some ideas, because everybody should have somebody that they can reach out to if they're ever in a crisis or they need help. So just put in the chat who that person is for you. And we can move on to Lauren's.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you, Paris. Everything she just covered is obviously very, very important, and it falls in line with self-care, which I'm going to be talking about next. To start off, I ask everyone to think about your phone battery for a second, okay? What do you do when it says you have 10% left or 1% remaining? You find a charger and you plug it in, right? Yeah, at least that's what I do. I mean, but imagine if that's how we prioritize our mental health. If we took the time to recharge when we needed it most. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that self-care is easy, because it certainly isn't, but it is something we're all deserving of. The way I see it is that the beauty of self-care is that it's unique to each person. You know, what brings me joy might not be the same as what makes Paris happy, but if we take the time to do something good for ourselves each day, that's what matters. That's what counts at the end of the day. Sometimes I feel like self-care can have this negative connotation of being selfish, but I actually think it's being productive, because sometimes the most productive thing you can do is maybe just relax or do an act of kindness for yourself. And whether that's going for a walk or getting your vitamin D or lighting a candle, eating a snack, doodling, writing affirmations, listening to music, decluttering, the list goes on. It's whatever works for you. But this can help us just pause from what we're doing and see the good in something else. And sometimes self-care for some of us might just be as simple as getting out of bed in the morning and brushing your teeth. When Paris and I were talking about this and preparing this presentation, we kind of kept going back to the idea that sometimes self-care can take on the smallest forms. And maybe some of you can relate to this. But we just talked about sometimes if you're at a low, it's obviously going to be really hard to see the good in something, or even just have the motivation to see the good. But if you just kind of celebrate your tiny accomplishments, like brushing your teeth, that can kind of take you a long way. For me personally, I found a lot of power in gratitude. I think that when we see the good, when we find the joy in small things, our day-to-day lives can feel a little brighter in the midst of what we're struggling with, and in the midst of what can often feel like a very dark world. But every night I try, keyword there is try, but I'm getting better at this, is to journal 3 things I'm grateful for. And I'm not a self-care expert whatsoever, but what I do is I just take this journal out every night. I write down 3 things. Sometimes they're the most random moments during the day, or just kind of what might seem irrelevant to somebody, but just even if they're super small or if they're big accomplishments, anything like that, I'll just write it down, and it's kind of put things into perspective for me. It's helped me appreciate the little things even when it feels hard to. So we'd love to hear what your favorite way to self-care is. So please share that in the chat if you're comfortable. And in the meantime, Paris, would you want to share maybe something you do for self-care?
Yeah. So my like the way that I self-care is usually I will go for a run or do a workout or something, and then take a shower. And then after that, I'll usually like clean my room or pick something up. Just really like it can be something so small, like, oh, I didn't fold my laundry or I didn't make my bed. But that kind of just makes me feel like I kind of have everything put together, and it makes me feel more in control, which is definitely something that when I'm having a low, that's something that I really need.
I love reading all of these. It's so heartwarming because it's kind of different for everyone. Like I said, like self-care is kind of a very subjective thing. It kind of just varies upon each of us because something that works for me might not work for you, but that's the beauty of it. Everything kind of circles back to the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. You really do have to nourish to flourish. You have to take care of yourself first, no matter what that looks like. So all in all, I'm kind of just breezing through this, I'm sorry. But all in all, taking care of your mental health can help you live a more sustainable lifestyle. So just remember that a little self-care can take you a long way, especially when you're struggling. Thank you.